Bill Markley is a longtime friend and guest at White Stallion Ranch and a longtime member of the Western Writers of America. Bill is currently a member for the Will Rogers Medallion Awards, and one of Bill's most recent books on the legendary West series is Wild Bill Hickok and Buffalo Bill Cody, Plainsmen of the legendary West. These books were wildly successful. Bill's love of history and travel were instilled in him as a young boy growing up on the family farm in Pennsylvania. Bill has also been in the films Dances with Wolves, Son of the Morning Star, Far and Away, Gettysburg, and Crazy Horse. Bill's soon-to-be-released book on Jim Bridger promises to take you to the next level. After 2 years of painstaking research, his respect for Jim Bridger only grew. He accepted all people, no matter who they were, and only when they turned on him would he treat them as enemies. He tried to stay out of fights, but if one was unavoidable, he was in the forefront. Like many of us, Jim Bridger was in love with the West. Enjoy this great podcast with good friend Bill Markley. Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast. This is where talk is all about the West, the spirit of the West, and especially the people and personalities that make up the West. This is brought to you by White Stallion Ranch and Cowboy Spirit Radio Productions. Russell, how are you doing today, bud?
I'm good. I'm not sure why.
You got a big
around today.
You got a big silly smile on your face. That's a good thing.
It's just ignorant space.
Yeah, I know better than that.
Some sort of odd reaction to pain. Anyway, we're good. We're busy and the weather's perfect, and so we're pretty happy to be. We're in a different place than normal, so our sound's going to be a little different because we have a great group in the Longhorn Room meeting and learning about how to do better eye surgery on animals, and longtime friends of the ranch. So anyway,
I feel like I'm sitting here in the presence of greatness. I've got two of the best writers I've ever been able to sit down with. You and especially Bill Markley. I mean, between the two of you, you've got quite a few volumes of work. I don't even feel like I should be here, but I am here, so we're going to make it work one way or the other. I've written, but nothing like the two of you have written. So I'm excited. Bill Markley has been a longtime friend and a guest at White Stallion Ranch, and I am thrilled to welcome him. Bill, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and it's great to be here back at the ranch.
Yeah, back at the ranch. Nobody complains about being here. I've noticed that. I have noticed that.
It's one of my favorite go-to places. So, I mean, if you've not been here, folks, come to the White Stallion Ranch. And they didn't pay me to say that.
We will later, but we haven't paid him yet. The check has not cleared anyway. At any rate, I know that you've been a longtime member of the Western Writers of America and a former board member, and you're currently a board member for the Will Rogers Medallion Awards.
Correct.
So, real quick, tell us because I've never heard of the Will Rogers Medallion Awards.
Yeah. Will Rogers.
hey Stan, we had to do a break because we had a non-crisis that called me away. So we are going to pick it up where we left off and mark a 5 for that. Stephen will lead in with the question again, so you can play it either way.
Okay, so Bill, I have never heard of the Will Rogers Medallion Awards, so I'm just ignorant. Could you fill me in on what those are, because I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Sure, it's a great organization, and it's been around, I should know this since I'm on the board, but probably about 20 years or so. And it's an organization that honors Will Rogers, who everyone knows was a great writer, comedian, actor. In fact, he was the most popular actor back in the day, back in the 30s, nationwide. So anyway, it honors writers that write that Will would recognize in Western writing. So categories like fiction, nonfiction, poetry. He actually really started with poetry, but it keeps the West alive, and it's a competition. So people compete and say, Western nonfiction or whatever. And then in October, there's always a ceremony honoring the people that, placed in the tops there. So yeah, it's a great organization and an award. I hope people can find it on the internet and learn more about it. And I hope if you're a writer listening to this that you'll compete in the future.
And where do they do it?
It's been in Fort Worth, and now they're moving to the Will Rogers Museum in Oklahoma. That'll be this year. They'll be there. So
where in Oklahoma?
Oh, jeez. Okay. I'm an old guy. Outside of Oklahoma City, and I can't think of.
Oklahoma's not that big of a state. They'll find it.
It's big enough. So it's near Oklahoma City.
Yeah, being on the board of directors, I'm gonna get killed now that I can.
Oh yeah.
We probably should cut that out.
Okay, so now not only are you a writer, but you're also an actor.
Well, yeah, loosely speaking, I was. I like to call myself a background artist. When you see a movie, the people walking in the background, across the street or wherever, that's what I did. So several movies.
I can promise you, you were in Dances with Wolves, Gettysburg, Crazy Horse. I mean, other movies. Right. You won't see me wandering around in the back scenes of any of these movies. So I'm impressed. Is that okay with you?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was going to just say probably the craziest one. I was in the movie Far and Away, if you remember that one. Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman.
Absolutely.
And at the end, they had the Oklahoma land rush scene, and that was crazy. I mean, for people who ride out there were 1,000 riders in that scene and 250 wagons, and they shot the cannon off, and then we all take off at full gallop.
Wow.
That was nuts.
And where'd they shoot that?
That was okay. It's the I like to joke about that. It was, of course, the Oklahoma land rush, but it was filmed near Pryor Creek, Montana, and they did it there because the scenery kind of looked like it would have in Oklahoma, and there were no high wires or anything else like that. They couldn't find anything like that in Oklahoma that would, be good, that you wouldn't see a modern, facility
but
out there.
Being the knowledgeable guy you are, you probably know where they filmed the movie Oklahoma.
I don't.
Southern Arizona, the San Rafael Valley and Sonoyta.
Oh, wow.
And it's got that rolling grasslands. San Rafael Valley is actually an interesting place because it is considered to be the one remaining section of Arizona that is pretty much how we would have seen it if we were traveling through here in the 1860s, 70s. Up until the 1880s, when all the, we go from 1870, 5,132 cattle in the state of Arizona, to 15 years later, the cattle growers estimated over 700,000 in the state. And the overgrazing and the drought that combined to really change, almost certainly, the ecosystem and the rangeland. Backing up, San Rafael Valley looks kind of like, I've been to the Masai Mara in Africa, and it's just grass and mountains surrounding and some trees, not a lot of trees, very few. And it's spectacular. And so they filmed Oklahoma there and in Sonoyta, that whole area. So the movie Oklahoma wasn't filmed there.
Right. That's very cool.
Now that I've known Russell and I'm getting to know him pretty well, he's really changed how I look at some of these movies, because he's educated me. In some of these movies, they appear to be filmed place A, and they're not. They're filmed in place B.
Oh, yeah.
And it's pretty interesting.
I'm really horrible. Never go to the movies with me because I just start picking things, Westerns, I start picking out things that are wrong, and my wife nudges me and says, "Shut up! It's just a movie."
Okay, well, there is that. Okay, now you have written some books that are from the Western. I think all from the Western genre. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, yes. And you've written some books that I think are really interesting. But two I want to talk about specifically, and then I want to get to actual topic. You've written Geronimo and Sitting Bull, Leaders of the Legendary West.
Mm-hmm.
interesting read. Billy the Kid and Jesse James, Outlaws of the Legendary West, which I really enjoyed. And now you've been nice enough to pass on your next book, Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson, Legendary Lawmen of the Legendary West. Okay, and these books were published about 5 months apart from one another.
Right.
And that's really, I don't know if you had to publish one because you did the other and people were clamoring for it. What happened with that?
Well, okay, the publisher, my co-author and I, Callan Cusworth, we did the Old West Showdown series, which we've talked about in the past here. And we were doing that, and I was talking with the editor at the time, Erin Turner, and she said, I really need a series done comparing Old West characters. Do you want to do it? I said, let me think about it. Yes. So boom, I had 3 books I had to write in 2 years. So that's how that came about. And I mean, you can ask my wife. I was working, night and day, and I kind of joked that I'm retired now, but it was like, yeah, I was busier now than I was back when I was working, type thing. But it was fun to do. I really enjoyed it. To dig in and research and try to come out and find out, there's so much legend encrusted on these people, and to strip that away and get to the true story of what was going on with these people.
And these are not short books. These are not pocket books. These are serious, great books.
And every paragraph in these I have endnotes for them, because people are going to say, oh, where'd you get your information? Especially if I reveal something that's not, the people think is real today. I mean, it's, I was telling somebody earlier today about, Wild Bill. I did one on Wild Bill and Buffalo Bill too. People get that confused all the time, and we talked about it last time. But, the dead man's hand that Wild Bill is supposed to be holding at the time. Well, think about that. Somebody's killed, somebody shoots him, and the rest of us are sitting at a table playing poker, and the guy's trying to shoot us. Fortunately, his cap is misfiring. And so how many people are going to stop and say, what was in Wild Bill's hand while this guy's trying to shoot me? I mean, that didn't happen. The story came out like 50 years later. There was a doctor who went in to help take care of Wild Bill's body after he was shot. And he said that he had slumped off his stool with his cards still crimped in his hand when he went over the side, and there were 2 aces and 2 eights, and he didn't know what the 5th card was. Now, this guy was a noted jokester, telling the story later on. No one else has ever told the story. So it's one of those things, I leave it in the book like, here's the information. If you want to believe it, fine. If not, you can go either way. But here it is.
You didn't interview anybody that was there?
No, I would have liked to. They're all dead.
Well, yeah, there is that. That makes those interviews a problem, doesn't it?
Right.
Okay, so the book we're here to talk about is The Life and Times of Jim Bridger, and it's not even out yet.
Right.
But I love the fact that we're able to talk to you about it before it comes out, because it's going to make people say, I got to know more about that. So talk about that, at least from the beginning, and let's get deep into this.
Yeah, Jim Bridger, I think everybody's probably heard of Jim Bridger. They know a little bit about him, but I spent 2 years researching him, and one of the things when you research somebody, you feel like you start to kind of get to know him after a while, and he was an amazing man. I think, in my mind, if you ask me who the greatest Westerner of all time would be, I would say Jim Bridger. He was just a hero. He was a guy. He wasn't a gunslinger, a gunfighter. He didn't pick a fight or look for a fight. He was always trying to get out of a fight. But if he couldn't, then he was there. I mean, he was the kind of guy that you would want there with you in a bad situation. Born in Virginia, his parents moved west. They wound up around St. Louis, Missouri. His parents died when he was a kid. He bought a flatboat and ferried people across the Missouri River. Apprenticed to a gunsmith, and then when he was, I think, 17, 18 years old, he headed west with a fur trapping expedition, Ashley and Henry. Went up the river to North Dakota. He was he was out there for, I want to say, probably 15 years before ever coming back to civilization. But here's a guy that never learned to read or write. He would sign with an X. But he was very proficient in languages. He knew English, Spanish, French, and several Native American languages. And he was very proficient in sign language, to the point where there's an account where he sat down with a bunch of Lakotas, and he's talking to them in sign language, and he actually made them laugh, belly laugh, from telling them stories with his sign language.
Wow.
So, and again, really kind of a diplomat. He would try to diffuse any kind of bad situations, but they did occur. He probably had a photographic memory, I think. He went through various terrain and topography, and he could recreate maps on a hide or a piece of paper, and topographic engineers would look at that and they say, holy cow, this is accurate. So to me, he was an amazing guy.
And back then, the ability to create a map was everything.
Oh, yeah.
If you couldn't create a map, if you couldn't follow a map,
Right.
The written communication was not what it is now, and you certainly didn't have Google or anything akin to that. Right. So you had to have maps, and they had to be able to be well read by people who you didn't understand what their grasp of a specific language was. And like you said, there was English, there was Spanish, and there was Indian, and they had to be able to. Any one of those had to be able to follow that, I would imagine.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he was able to bridge that gap.
Right.
That's absolutely remarkable.
Yeah. Like I said, he was a remarkable man, and he led government expeditions and things. And there are human stories where they wanted to get through a mountain pass, and Bridger said, "Okay, we need to go over here a couple miles to the left," and the commander says, "No, we want to go straight on," and he's, "No, you can't do that." And there was one instance, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was in Wyoming, where he said, "I'll tell you what, birds carry their own food to try to get over the top of that mountain. You can't do it." And they came up to it, and sure enough, they could not go the way that the commander wanted to go, and they went back the way that Bridger wanted them to go. So.
Okay, and again, he may not have been able to communicate everything he wanted to communicate, but he evidently communicated enough.
Well, yeah, but some of these commanders at the time, expedition commanders, were kind of bullheaded and were going to do things.
No, really? Yeah, and he had to be somewhat, like you said, he had to be able to bridge that gap,
right,
between bullheaded and we need to do it a particular way for a particular reason.
Right.
Remarkable. Absolutely. That's really interesting.
Well, we'll take a quick break.
At Golden Wings Horseshoes, we've always known that our best marketing is done by our customers. We received a letter from Barb Whitus, and here is her story in her words. I have a 10-year-old quarter horse gelding. He was diagnosed with a navicular cyst about 3 years ago, so he had shoes and pads on at all times. I heard about Golden Wings Horseshoes from Russell True on his Cowboy Up podcast and decided to try them. He was continually sore with regular shoes, and within 1 month of wearing Golden Wings Horseshoes, he was back to competing and winning buckles. Thank you very much for such a great product. Stories like this from Barb are just one of the many reasons we do what we do. If you're looking for a great solution for your horse, please check out goldenwingshorseshoes.com or call us at 602-909-3144. That's goldenwingshorseshoes.com or 602-909-3144 and get ready to saddle up.
Okay, we're back with Bill Markley, and he's talking about Jim Bridger. And you said when we introduced this that most everybody had heard of Jim Bridger. I literally had never heard of Jim Bridger. So, I don't think I'm a person of one. I think there's more people like me. Now, I know that he was big into language and that sort of thing. But there is a story that I did read about briefly. It was called the Hugh Glass story. Is that correct?
Right. Yep. Hugh Glass. He was a mountaineer at the time. In fact, it's kind of funny because when I use the term mountaineer, everybody calls them mountain men today, but back in the day they were called mountaineers. So just a little piece of trivia. But Hugh Glass was kind of an interesting character. Not much is known about him. The main thing that people know about him is that he was mauled by a grizzly bear, and they thought he was going to die. If you've seen the movie The Revenant, that's based on Hugh Glass' story. But so the story goes is that Henry was leading a few men up the Grand River in what's now South Dakota, and Glass was out by himself, came upon a grizzly bear, whether she had cubs or not, no one knows for sure. He's mauled by this bear. The bear is killed. Glass is so mauled up that they think he's probably going to die.
Who killed the bear?
Not sure. There's a lot of variety.
Okay.
That's one of the things. There's nobody that was right there that told the story. It's all second, third hand stories of how he got mauled. So he's mauled. He's left there. William Henry says, "Okay, we got to push on. I need 2 volunteers to stay behind with Hugh Glass." So the story is that there was an older mountaineer and a younger one, and a lot of historians believe that was Jim Bridger. He would have been like an 18-year-old kid at the time. And so the trappers move on. They're heading up to what's now North Dakota, the confluence of the Yellowstone and the Missouri River, Fort Henry up there. Leave 2 guys behind. Now, the Arikara at the time were out after any trappers. They'd kill any trapper they could find. And they'd had to run in with the Arikara a few days earlier, and 2 of their men had been killed.
Where are they from?
The Arikara? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, they're a Missouri River tribe, Upper Missouri tribe. They would build villages along the river. So the Arikara were after them. They were trying to steal what little horses they had at the time. They were following Henry's party. So he leaves 2 guys behind. They're there with Hugh Glass. He's not doing too well. And they finally figure out, you know what, this guy's going to die. Let's just get out of here. So they take his rifle. They take all his accoutrements, take off, and go after Henry and the other guys. And they get in and they report, yeah, well, Hugh died.
Okay.
But Hugh did not die. He lived. He was able to make it back to the Missouri River and then get to a trading post. And he got better. He got better there. They outfitted him, and then he headed upriver, and he confronted of the 2 men. The younger guy was still upriver. The older guy had gone downriver. The younger guy he forgave, and the older guy had his rifle and had gone down to Fort Atkinson, I believe it was, at the time. And so Glass goes after him, and all he wants is his rifle back. And so he gets his rifle back, and that's the end of that story. So now a lot of people think that the kid that he forgave was Jim Bridger. So as I said, there was no primary sources. There was nobody that was right there that wrote it down that said, hey, Jim Bridger. There are 2 secondary sources. And they just say, hey, one of our men was mauled by a bear, a grizzly bear. They called them white bears at the time. Left behind, and lo and behold, hey, he showed up at the fort. Again, not naming anybody. It was about 10 years after the fact. There was a newspaper article, and they named the older guy. Got his name correct. But the younger guy, they named as Bridges with an S, not an R, and there was no first name. They said the younger kid was Bridges. And so that's that. And then in the 1890s, there was an old riverboat captain, last name was LaBarge, and he said, yeah, rumor had it on the river that it was Jim Bridger that left it, Hugh Glass behind. So based on the newspaper article saying Bridges and an old riverboat pilot saying, yeah, rumor, historians took that and ran with it. So that's where the deal that Jim Bridger was the kid behind. So now with me, in my book that's going to come out, I lay all those things out so people can, determine for themselves whether they want to think that it was Jim Bridger or not. I mean, nobody knows for sure, really. But another instance was.
Can I back up?
Yeah.
Because the author who wrote The Revenant.
Yeah. There was a book, and then the movie was based on the book.
Right, and they did really, really well. Yeah. He wrote what's it called, the Fetterman? It was another massacre where the Indians, and Bridger was in that book.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
That was
I have to look it up.
Well, there was the Fetterman Massacre.
Yeah.
In outside of Fort Phil Kearny in Wyoming.
Exactly.
But Bridger. Okay, we're gonna really. This is really a big aside. But Bridger was there. He was out there.
Right. He was in that book. He was at the fort, right?
Yeah, he was one of the scouts for everybody coming through, and Fetterman and his men. He said to Carrington, who was the commander at the time, he said, Fetterman and some other guys came up. They'd fought in the Civil War, they were fighters. And Fetterman said, hey, I could take, 80 men or whatever, ride through the whole Lakota territory and, tame the whole
And just
situation.
to give a little frame of reference, since I took us down this divergent path, this is a Custer Little Bighorn level massacre.
Right.
The Indians en masse killed virtually the entire cavalry that was out there at the time. The Fetterman led.
Yes.
And it was outside Fort
Phil Kearny.
Phil Kearny.
And near kind of south of Sheridan, Wyoming today,
Right.
if somebody wants to know
Right.
that. But Bridger had met them before all this happened, and he said to Carrington, he said, hey, your boys, Fetterman and those guys, they don't know how to fight Indians. and then Bridger leaves. He goes up to Fort C.F. Smith, which is further north from there, to do some work up that way. Meanwhile, it's around December, somewhere in December. I'm not real good with dates. But anyway, the Lakota and the Cheyenne, they're all together. They go out, they set up this elaborate plan where they go out and attack the woodcutters, which are a couple miles away from where the fort is. And then Fetterman and his men come out, and Carrington says, do not follow them over this particular ridge. And long story short, Fetterman does. He follows them. I think it was like over 85 men or something like that. They go over the ridge, and they're surrounded. And Crazy Horse was one of the leaders in this attack, and they wipe them out. And so, that was a precursor to Custer and the Little Bighorn. But, Bridger recognized that they didn't know what they were doing, and he was right.
So we can't let a little current fiction escape this story, because Jim Bridger is famous right now because of this mini-series or whatever they call it, American Primeval. And, there was huge buzz about it, and we watched it. I'm not sure I'm happy that I did, because it was pretty rugged, and I don't think it was very true. What you saw it too, because you kind of have to speak to it, right? So you reluctantly watched it. Is that fair?
I watched it because I knew I'd be asked questions about it, and
so here we are.
That's the thing, right?
I held my nose the whole time I watched it because it was a real stinker. Okay, so if you want to watch some sort of action movie with a lot of blood and guts and that sort of thing, hey, it's a fine movie. But if you want to know, they played fast and loose so bad with history, it's ridiculous. At the time the story takes place, Bridger does not own Fort Bridger. The Mormons had basically evicted him from that fort.
And where was it?
Fort Bridger was southwest part of Wyoming. It was right on the Oregon Trail, and it was a convenient spot because from there you could, continue on up to Oregon, or branch off later to California, or head down to Salt Lake City. So at the time of the story, it was Brigham Young was the Mormons didn't. Brigham Young was the governor of Utah Territory at the time, and the president at the time said, "You're out. I'm going to bring in one of my own men that was not, he was not Mormon." And Brigham Young and the Mormons all said, "No, we're going to fight you on this." And so they got riled up. And long story short, we sent an army out there. There was never any battle in there that shows the Mormons and the U.S. Army fighting each other. That did not happen. The Mormons did burn a couple of wagon trains with supplies that were going out there, but again, so that big battle scene never happened. Bridger didn't own the fort at the time because Brigham Young believed that he was stirring up the Shoshone and Utes against the Mormons, and he sent a posse out to arrest Jim Bridger. Bridger heard about it. He and his wife, and all of his wife, he had about 3-4 wives, I can't remember right now, but they were all Native American women. They found out that the Mormon posse was coming, and they left the fort. Mormons took over the fort, and so at the time of that story, Jim Bridger did not have possession of that fort. And it shows in the story that he sells the fort to the Mormons. He did not do that. Now, the Mormons will tell you that he did sell it, and they have documents that show that he did sell the fort. But remember, well, maybe I didn't talk about this, but Bridger could not write. Did I talk about this already?
No.
Bridger, he couldn't read or write, so he always signed with an X. So there's these documents.
They got that right in the movie.
Yeah, so he signed with an X, and but the thing is, the bill of sale of the document did not show up until 2 years after the fact, and the guys that all signed off on this, we probably don't have enough time, but they're all shady characters. In fact, 2 of them were excommunicated from the Mormon Church. So I do not believe that Bridger sold the fort to the Mormons. And so then, I know how much time we have. I don't want to.
Oh, we'll keep going.
Okay.
This is interesting.
So in that show, they show the Mountain Meadow Massacre, which did actually happen, but not in the way that it's portrayed in the movie. And these are some things that really bug me, because the way it really happened probably would have made an interesting movie, but they played fast and loose with what had happened. So there were when the people were massacred in this wagon train, they were non-Mormons. The Mormons and Utes did attack the wagon train. And they were surrounded for several days, and then Mormons came in and said, this is the true story, not what was in the movie. The Mormons came in and said, hey, look, you're surrounded by the Indians, but we've made a deal with them. They'll let you come out, if you put your arms down, everything's fine. So the people in the wagon train believed them. They separated the men out from the women and the children out from them. And then on signal, the white Mormon men shot all the non-Mormon men. And I might be getting this backwards, I'm not sure. But then the Utes took care of the women and tomahawked them and killed all them. And the children under a certain age, I think it may have been like 8 or something like that, they kept them. They didn't kill them. And then they were adopted into Mormon families because they thought they wouldn't have enough memory to remember what had happened. But these kids did. They remembered that Indians would go to the stream and wash off their faces, and then they would be white men. So and then it finally came out, and there was John Lee, who was basically the scapegoat. They actually took him out to the site where the massacre occurred and shot him in a firing squad. But so the controversy...
He was a Mormon.
He was a Mormon, yeah. But so the controversy is, did Brigham Young order this, or did John D. Lee and the others do it on their own?
And they were Mormon leaders?
Yes, yeah. John D. Lee was a Mormon leader.
And what do you believe?
But I think Brigham Young knew about it.
And the goal was?
The goal was they didn't want anybody passing through Mormon territory. These people were going to California at the time.
So it was meant to be a deterrent.
Yeah.
For future.
Well, again, this what's called the Mormon War was going on at the time. At the time the massacre occurred. So, I think it was a deterrent. And it was for a while.
Probably pretty effective, I would think.
You had to pass through there, and but they tried to cover it up. I mean, that originally they said all the Indians did it, but there was enough evidence that it was a combination. And so it's one of those things that and there's still controversy today. There's a monument out there, and every now and then the monument's pulled down from there. So there's people on both sides.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I'm certainly not the historian you are. I've read several books. Some of them aren't always flattering about some Mormon history, but Brigham Young usually gets a pretty clean slate. He usually gets kind of a pass, kind of a wise statesman. What do you think?
Yeah. Okay. Well, full disclosure, I'm not a Mormon, but I'm not anti-Mormon either. Whatever they want to do is fine with their religion and that sort of thing with me, and it's fine. There's a lot of good people. I have friends that are Mormons. But where was I going?
Well, I'm just because I grew up this Mormon country where we are in Arizona's second per capita Mormon population to Utah in the U.S. and I grew up with a lot of folks that are, and so I've always been pretty pro-Mormon.
Yeah.
I think the history is interesting because it's complicated.
Yeah. So
I'm interested in Brigham Young's.
Yeah, I think Brigham Young, from what I know. Okay, I mean you have to know that they were attacked back in Illinois and Missouri and that sort of thing. And so they needed to they wanted to find a place where they could get away from the United States.
Sure.
And have their own country, their own kingdom, whatever. And so they did come out to the Utah territory, but at the time it was owned by Mexico. And so they got into what was owned by Mexico, and then all of a sudden, boom, we had the Mexican War, and we take all that territory. Now they're back in the United States again. And so the deal was, Brigham Young could be governor, and everything was fine there for them. And then, one thing happened. The politics at the time. Then I think it was Buchanan decided, I'm going to put in my own man, and that's when things went crazy there. But I believe Brigham Young was number one was his people, the Mormons. He was going to do whatever he could do to protect them and promote the Mormon country,
religion, way of life.
Yes, their kingdom, a theocracy,
right?
Their theocracy, and so he would do whatever it took to protect that. So I think that's where he was coming from. But he could be a nasty character to anybody outside, or anybody that moved away from the Mormon religion. I mean, he was their enemies. They were an enemy. So interesting.
Well,
you're either with us or not.
Well, we've really taken you off the Jim Bridger trail.
But it's part of the story. Yes.
But then they can buy your book, right?
Yes. Yeah, and that'll be out in September.
Life and Times of Jim Bridger.
Right.
Far Country Press, September, October. Just sum Jim Bridger up for us.
Yeah. To me, again, he'd be the kind of guy, if you like to sit around a campfire and hear tales and stories, I mean, he would be amazing. I mean, if you had him here at the White Stallion Ranch, he'd probably have everybody mesmerized by his stories. And some true, some not so true. But, he was one of the first people that went into Yellowstone National Park. And he told the geologists about that, Ferdinand Hayden and other people, about that, and then they really wanted to go see it. And then after they went and saw it, they said, we got to make this a national park. And it was the first national park in the United States.
Interesting.
And so, I see Bridger's, fingerprints all over that one. Where Interstate 80 is now up in Wyoming, that was the overland trail that Bridger helped map that out. It was kind of south of the Oregon Trail, and there's a Bridger Pass up there, and he did all that. Amazing guy. He got all the way out to California. He came down through this area. They were all trapping all over the place, but he remembered. And there's a lot of really good stories, but I know we don't have, just some of the little ruckuses that he got into.
Well, I can tell you this. I understand why your wife says when she's watching a movie with you, just be quiet, because you know details about details, and that's not that easy to do.
It's like, well, in that American Private Evil, there, a scene where they had their own kind of saddles, and
there you go.
and they had a shack up in the mountains, and it was, boards. So they wouldn't have boards. It would have been, log cabins. Just little dumb things like that. That when I see it, it's like, oh.
This has been a lot of fun. Bill, thank you for coming in. I genuinely appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And you've got a long list. How do people get that list of books? Because a lot of people love the Western history that you specialize in.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, it's really easy. It's my website is billmarkley.com, or you can find any, search for me in Amazon or Barnes & Noble, or better yet, go to your local bookstore in your town and order it. They can order it right there.
And that's Markley, Markley, billmarkley.com.
Yes.
Super. And I'll end with, I know you're on the board of the Will Rogers, but this Wyatt and Bat Masterson book has Will Rogers Medallion Award on the front cover here.
Right.
So
I won that before I was in the book.
I was going to ask you how the before and after
right.
went.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Well, that's super. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Russell, it's always great, at least from my side of the desk here, when I get to listen to someone who not only knows something about a topic, but they know a lot about a topic and they know ancillary things about the topic. And today's podcast is a great example of that. He knows a lot about a lot of things, and he can bring these things to life. And from my point of view, he can separate fact from what might be fiction. And to be able to have that at my fingertips is really a pretty remarkable occurrence. So I really appreciate Bill coming in and taking time from his vacation.
Right. Well, and I mean, we took him down every path but the one we were supposed to be on, and he never lost his way, except he didn't know where the movie Oklahoma was.
Well, okay, that's against him, but he'll come correct next time.
He does now.
He does.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, and thank you for being with us for the Cowboy Up podcast again. Entertainment, education, a little bit of a touch of cowboy wisdom. My name is Stan the Radio Man, and I'm the leader of the Cowboy Spirit Radio Network, and it's our privilege and our pleasure to bring you this program every week. And we are in the business of helping people like you also tell your story about the great, wonderful stories of the wild, wild West. We're out here to keep the cowboy tradition alive. If you'd like to have a part in this program, perhaps be a sponsor, perhaps be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Or perhaps you'd like to do your very own radio program, which that is possible. Reach out to me at Stan, S-T-A-N, at witradio.net. That's witradio.net. Let me know what you'd like to do, and we would like to help you. And by the way, of course, this comes from the classic, the historic, the wonderful place where I go to get my act together sometime to rest, relaxation, and find out what the world is all about. WhiteStallion.com. WhiteStallion.com, the famous White Stallion Ranch in Tucson, Arizona. And we are also connected to a variety of wonderful guest and dude ranches throughout the West. We'll find a place for you to have your inner cowboy, your cowboy experience, and have a wonderful time with family, friends, and perhaps even do some corporate business in a better and very, very challenging and exciting situation. Again, whitestallion.com, whitestallion.com. Until next time, all the best and blessings to you. Remember, stand tall, ride tall, stay safe, do your best, do good work, and keep the cowboy tradition alive. Till next time, bye for now.